Greetings, colleagues. This is one symposium where I very much regret not being with you. I think this is a vital discussion. We know that inequality is a scourge on both economic and social cohesion. Inequality is growing between and within most countries around the world. And we know that it was one of the causes of the global crisis. And when we consider that the global economy is no more stable than it was 6 years ago, and we see historic highs still of unemployment, our young people without jobs, and indeed generally a struggle for people to live on the incomes that they are earning, then we know something's very wrong. But if you want to look at it in statistical terms, then your colleagues will show you two graphs, I'm sure, that always shock me. One is to see the global wages share. Over the last 30 years, it's a curve that just goes downwards every year. And of course, if you look at the income share for the top 1%, then it will make you sick. We know that if you go to the most unequal of wealthy nations, the US, and you look at the fact that one family, just one family, the Waltons, the Walmart Waltons, and of course we know how they treat their staff. I saw last week that one of their shops is calling for customers to donate products for the staff for Christmas. This is sickening when that family owns 40% a wealth that's equal to the bottom 40% of Americans. One family, wealth equivalent to 40% of the poorest Americans. And of course, if you look at the Forbes 400 list, then you see that 400 people in America actually own as much as $2 trillion, which is the total GDP of Canadian citizens. So that just gives you the extremes. But let's look at what it means in practical terms for some of our workers. We know that from the OECD report that market income has risen between 2008 and 2010, indeed more than it did 12 years previously. That was at the onset of the crisis, and we're waiting for figures that we know already demonstrate that that's simply continued to be the case. But in practical terms, when disposable incomes in the UK are actually back to 1987 levels, when 40% of German workers haven't had an increase in real terms for 15 years, when you've actually got minimum wages all around the world, take a look at the fight in Indonesia on which people can't live. And indeed, you've got a situation where almost 80% of the world's people have none or inadequate social protection, then we've got work to do. We've got real work to do. And in the lead up to the Berlin Congress, I invite you all to be part of the debates. Send us the materials about your struggles, your policy positions. But I want to see us come out with renewed vigour, not just to fight for collective bargaining rights, because we know it works. And we know that the ILO shows the demise of collective bargaining in real terms. This is a major issue for us. But at the same time, if we don't put a floor under those collective bargaining agreements, if we don't make sure every worker has universal social protection and a minimum wage on which they can live, a minimum living wage, then we are not dealing with a fair share of the world's wealth for working people. We're not dealing with the challenge of full employment. We're not dealing with the questions around fundamental rights for workers to have a voice on these issues, to collectively organise around them both in their workplaces and in their democracies. We also know that the global economy, of course, is around 2.9 billion workers, 60% of them in the formal sector and 40%, a massive 40%, in the sector of desperation for which there are no rules. And of course that sector is withering decent work. When in the formal sector you have more than 50% of people in vulnerable work or some form of irregular or precarious employment, then again this is core business for us. As we move forward to the informal discussion, the standard setting discussion at the ILC in June, I can only emphasise that this is not an employer's agenda. This is actually an agenda for working people. We know that without social protection, without a minimum wage on which you can live, without rights and jobs, then in fact our people don't have a fighting chance for the dignity that is supposed to come from work. We also know that there are some elements that need to scaffold our work in this regard. The tax reform issues, stopping corporations shifting their profit and evading tax. We know that individuals, high net worth individuals, still have some $11 trillion in offshore accounts. The tax loss on that is equal to what it would cost, around $250 billion, to pay for the social protection floor, that standard that our colleagues negotiated for us at the ILO, pay for it for the 50 poorest countries annually. So our world is out of kilter. Our leaders have lost their moral compass. Inequality is at the core of the evil that we must address. I can only tell you that we are determined to have this debate, to take the discussions forward in the ILO, to find the tools to reduce inequality and the ambition for full employment and the elimination of poverty is central to our mission. But without you, without your intellectual thinking, without your commitment to organising workers in defence of their own rights, the social protection, the minimum wages and the collective bargaining rights that we know every worker must have, then without your efforts, this won't be a success. So the ACTRAV Symposium, critical work, a real intellectual struggle, a real struggle of commitment to actually put the resources in to allow workers a voice that will see them organise around these questions, see them hold their governments to account. That's our work from today. We need to take it forward into the ILC, but into the Congress, and then for the next 4 years, a major global assault on our part, on any nation that doesn't commit to social protection and a minimum wage on which people can live. I wish you well. I look forward to the outcomes. I know that the deliberations will be rich, and they will certainly backdrop the conference on inequality that is planned with Frank before the Congress of the ITUC, into the Congress, and then into our work for the next term. May I take the opportunity to say congratulations again to Maria Elena, who is now the Director of ACTRAV and is helping us with Raquel and Esther in Geneva drive these issues forward. Thank you very much for being there. Thank you for your deliberations. Solidarity.